22-year-old Katherine Johnson has had her medical marijuana license for 3 years.
I got it for a bike accident where I broke my back in 3 places.
Every day, to relieve her back pain, Kate smokes pot or eats food laced with it.
Just from experience taking pain pills, they make me so loopy and out of it and just real spacey, and driving on those, I feel like I'm a hazard and I will not drive on pain medications. But marijuana, it doesn't affect me in the same way. I'm still able to be alert and concentrate.
Driving while high has long been a staple of stoner movies.
No, I don't like breaking the law.
Yeah, I can see that.
But as marijuana has gained legitimacy as medicine,
Hey, man. Am I driving okay?
it's not just Cheech and Chong who are toking up and then getting behind the wheel anymore.
I think we're parked, man.
Drugs affect people's divided attention.
Glenn Davis trains Colorado police officers to spot impaired drivers. He says the effects of marijuana on driving can be subtle.
They may do well focusing on one thing, driving the car straight down the road, but when they have to start making decisions like, do I signal, how fast am I going, do I turn here, that's where the impairment is manifests. If you take a drug into your body and it comes to a point which causes impairment to the slightest degree, that's driving the influence of drugs or impairment, or if it causes influence which is substantially incapable, you shouldn't be operating a vehicle.
But Kate Johnson believes marijuana actually makes her a better driver.
It almost calms me down to a point of where I'm not in a hurry. I'm not going to have road rage. I'm not going to get upset if I'm stuck in traffic and I'm running late for work.
And Kate was willing to prove it by taking a driving test on a simulator after smoking a joint. But law enforcement and some lawmakers want to put the brakes on people like Kate. Right now, in many states where hundreds of thousands of people use medical marijuana legally, there is no limit on how much THC, that's the active ingredient in pot, can be in someone's blood while driving. The question is, should there be?
If we could get consensus on the exact right standard among medical marijuana and legalization advocates and law enforcement on the other side, I 100% would support that.
Sean McAllister is a pro-medical marijuana lawyer in Colorado, where medical marijuana use has exploded. He supports the push to establish what's called a per se standard. That's a limit for THC in the blood, much like the one for alcohol. But medical marijuana advocates say no other prescription drug, not painkillers like Vicodin or sedatives like Valium, have a specific limit.
No other medication has a per se standard, and people on the medical marijuana community feel they're being singled out. But I agree it's going in the right direction. I think law enforcement feels that they need to send a strong message that even though it's legal, we want to avoid public safety impacts. And I think, overall, that the idea that people shouldn't be driving impaired is the right idea.
But McAllister, who served on a state task force studying the effects of marijuana on driving, says it's too early to establish a hard limit because there's just not enough data on how high is too high to drive.
We don't have consensus on what the science is, so we should be able to set a standard that says, well, if you're over this, then there's a presumption you're probably impaired, but if you want to go to trial and tell a jury why maybe these other factors should be considered and you weren't really impaired, I think that's the right way to go in the meantime.
Other factors, like the time between when the marijuana was consumed and driving, and the tolerance that can result from long-term use. But marijuana advocates like Paul Armentano point out another problem. Unlike blood alcohol levels, which can be instantly determined with a breathalyzer, measuring THC requires a blood test. The test results are slow, and police just can't do them by the side of the road.
Do you think there is out there somewhere, though, a reasonable standard?
That's a difficult question to answer. Because right now, the only tool we have when we look at this science to try and determine an association between recent marijuana use and impairment are blood tests. And we are never going to have a roadside blood test. It's one thing to have a breathalyzer test for alcohol. because breathalyzer tests are seen by the courts and by the public at large to not be particularly intrusive. And it gives us a result at the scene.
Instantly, right.
Instantly.
But the lack of data or a quick and easy way to test for THC hasn't stopped some states where medical marijuana is legal from taking a zero-tolerance approach. In 3 of the 15 states where medical marijuana is legal, driving with any THC in the blood is a crime. Only one state, Nevada, has actually set a legal level, but advocates say it is far too low. A bill to set a blood THC threshold in Colorado died recently, when lawmakers said they just didn't have enough evidence to pick the right number. That prompted the state's attorney general to accuse lawmakers of failing to act on a critical public safety issue, saying in a statement, "I have seen the damage people driving under the influence of drugs and alcohol can inflict."
Anytime you're impaired and anytime you're behind a vehicle and you're driving, you're a danger.
Mark Ashby is a police officer and trained drug recognition expert. He says that the medical marijuana in use today is a lot more potent than the pot people used to smoke recreationally.
I think that people think that this drug is the same thing that was smoked back in the 60s, and it's not. The THC levels are so incredibly high. There's reports of people having hallucinations on it. It's an entirely new chemical. It's an entirely new problem for us.
We wanted to see for ourselves what happens when people drive after smoking medical marijuana. So we took 3 volunteers, Kate, whom you met before, Adam Curtis, and Jeff Tennell, to a driving simulator where Ashby could evaluate their reaction times and whether their abilities were impaired. Our volunteers met us at the lab for a 2-stage test. First, driving before consuming marijuana to establish their baseline skills. All of them said the simulator was not quite the same as driving a real car.
Takes, I think, a little getting used to.
It does. That's what you're doing.
Turns, these are
Just
weird.
get comfortable with the way the steering. It's real easy to oversteer.
After a little while, they got the hang of it.
Yeah, I'm used to the gas and the brake. It's just the turns that are throwing me off still.
So our volunteers have now finished their first round on the simulator. What they're going to do now is go out and ingest marijuana. They're going to come back and take another test, but this time they're going to have a DRE, a drug recognition expert here, watching them drive and seeing what the effects might be. And we'll see what happens.
Adam was first up.
Adjust the seat, the steering wheel, so you're comfortable. Okay. This is just like this morning, right?
But Adam seemed to be having a little trouble. Mark Ashby, our police expert, told us what he saw.
On Adam, we could see that he never even reacted appropriately.
Now we're going 80.
Sorry, I thought this was my miles per hour.
He had to be reminded where the gauges were.
Sorry. The tachometer's on your left, the
Okay,
speedometer's on your right.
sorry. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. I had it confused.
Okay. We didn't change the gauges or anything.
The car in front of him started to slow down. Then all of a sudden it braked to a stop to avoid an accident, and he ran right through it.
This is the moment of impact, and he barely flinches.
Do you think part of that could be attributable to this is a simulator, but it's still a very odd environment, and when a car stops on the video screen, you just don't react the same way you would if a real car stopped in front of you?
Quite possibly, but from talking with the gentlemen when they did their control run this morning, none of those indications were there when they were prior to taking the chemical that they ingested.
Later, on a trip up to the mountains, Adam had to contend with an aggressive driver on an icy road, and he ended up flipping his car.
Icy.
Yes.
Next up was Jeff,
Okay, so we'll go ahead and start the car with the key.
who had not consumed marijuana. But we didn't tell our expert that because we wanted to see if he could really tell the difference.
Jeff came in and sat down like he'd been in this car a dozen times. He sat down, he kind of got comfortable, he kind of checked the steering wheel, he checked where his gauges and his turn signal was, and then he put his hand up there like he'd been there 100 times. Smooth turns, properly done. The good thing is he looked at the traffic approaching. If you notice when he came through the underpass and there was that road coming off from the left, there was like 2-3 vehicles over there. He stopped and he focused and focused and focused for enough to make sure they were stopping before he went through. That's great. all in all, I'd say he's did not show signs of impairment.
Just take a foot off the gas, merge into traffic at the top of the hill.
Finally, it was Kate's turn.
She seemed to be a little calmer, maybe a little bit more focused. She was able to see, she reacted properly to the stoppage in the road. She gave an adequate amount of distance. I did see her looking around a little bit, checking her mirrors a little bit more. So when she made her left turn, the first one, she went way out into the second lane, almost all the way to the right edge of that. And then the second one, she turned right in the middle of the both lanes and then rode the median, the dotted line for several feet before she corrected and moved outward. So
Ashby said both Adam and Kate were noticeably impaired. Adam more so, as seen with his accident. And our third volunteer, Jeff, who hadn't consumed any marijuana, passed with flying colors. Now, our little test was anything but conclusive. What all sides of the debate do agree is that more data is needed to develop reasonable standards. But one thing is certain: as more and more people legally light up, the debate over DWHigh will do anything but die down.
If you've got it, watch it. If you don't, call your TV provider to get HDNet today.